Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoe Room Sessions. Welcome to the Shoe Room, Lara.
Thank you very much.
Could you tell people who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Lara Salam, and I'm the GIS and data visualization expert.
Wow, what does that mean? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Largely wrangling spatial data, so we deal with a lot of our own data that we collect and also other data that we work with, and it's just dealing with it, making it look beautiful and sharing it with the team.
Awesome. So take us back through the Lara contents page of your life and career. Where did you grow up and how did you end up as part of Ocean Conservation?
So I grew up in the northeast in Whitley Bay, lived 5 minutes from the beach my whole life. And then I went off to uni in Durham and I studied geography, which all the best people do. And I loved learning about landscapes and hills and mountains and valleys and how they formed. And then while I was doing geography, for most of our modules, we were producing scientific reports. There always had to be some kind of map involved with that. You always had to be showing at least where you were, or possibly showing some kind of data on a map. And I was introduced to this kind of slightly weird, slightly clunky software called GIS. And most people in my GIS labs hated it. They were like, this is frustrating bit of software, I can't get anything to work, I don't know what I'm doing. But I weirdly really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge and I really enjoyed the satisfaction of once you actually got it to work and you got it to do what you wanted it to do. So I thought, this is something that I want to take further. And I went and I worked for the market leader in GIS software, Esri, and I worked there for 4 years, starting as a graduate consultant and then...
Did you go straight from uni into Esri?
Well, actually I had a year off. I had a year where I went to Canada and I worked. I really wanted to travel. I really wanted to be one of those people who finishes uni and then goes and travels the world, but I didn't have any money. So, I had to work and I really wanted to go to Canada. And they have a British Council program for people who are native speakers of English, and they are basically trying to spread English culture around the world in the English language. So I went to Canada with them and I taught English for a year and it was amazing. Loved Canada so much.
What is the bit that grabbed you?
It was the wilderness. We just don't have wilderness like that in this country. I was pretty much in the middle of nowhere and I could walk up a hill and I could look out and I could see no people and no evidence of people, just massive forest, massive plains, and I just never really experienced anything like that before. I love the English countryside. It's very beautiful, it's very quaint, it's very historic, but there's no wilderness like that in this country. So that was what I found, really special.
Nice. So we come back from Canada?
Yeah, I came back from Canada and then I started a grad scheme at Esri.
Was that competitive to get on and to apply for?
I think it was. I don't really know at the time. You kind of just apply for something and you get it. You don't really have a sense of how competitive it was. It basically is, I don't want to say it's the standard for GIS software, but it largely is. Most people who you talk to about GIS, they're talking about using Esri software, sometimes open source as well, but if you're looking for a career in GIS, then I guess it was quite a competitive one to get onto.
Yeah.
And that was kind of rotating around the business. They started me in technical support, and it was just such a trial by fire, basically. You have people calling up being like, my software's not working, help me. And you've only just learned that piece of software existed.
And is that a rotation you just happened to start there, or do they start everyone there?
They start maybe half of them in technical support. It just a bit random, really.
Maybe that's the way to decide if they're going to stay or not. If people can't cope with that bit, it filters them out.
Yeah, so a bit of a trial by fire. Learned so much in that first 6 months. So much about problem solving and, if you're just banging your head against the wall, what are the steps, what are the troubleshooting steps? Something's going wrong, where do you start? and how do you fix it, and how do you take a logical approach to fixing something, not just trying things at random. You know, what are the steps to working out what it is that's going wrong and how to do that. So that was super helpful. And then there are other rotations like software demos, sales, data curating, which was looking after all of the open data. They have a massive open data library. So there was a role which was looking after all of that, which was really interesting. And then I stayed on with Esri as a GIS consultant for 2 more years. And I loved that day to day. That was like professional services role. So I was going out and basically joining other companies' GIS teams and helping them do all sorts of bits and pieces. It could have been automating a bit of manual work that, process that they did once a week or once a month that actually took someone kind of 5 days of time to do, and automated so that they could just press a button and have it done in the background and free up so much time for them to do other things. Sometimes it was processing data and getting data into a good condition and getting it stylized and ready for them to use and make their own maps. Sometimes it was creating mobile applications for people to go out and collect data in the field that could feed back, replacing paper systems and kind of old-fashioned stuff. So all sorts, like a massive range of projects. Really enjoyed the people I worked with. Really enjoyed the work that I did. Loved the challenge. Loved the problem-solving element of it. But over time, I was working mostly in transport and utilities, and I started to just be like, yeah, I really enjoyed that project, but I made a mobile app for someone to go out and check burst pipes. I was like, that's useful, like it helps society, I suppose, but I was like, I'm not excited about this. So that was the point where I started to be like, okay, I'm going to start looking what else is out there.
I think lots of people try and do what you did there and find, okay, I'm doing this, I enjoy the people and the work. Can I find the purpose? Is there a way that I can, okay, yeah, it does help, it does contribute. I think where we're so fortunate is that it just smacks you in the, like it is the reason.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I started looking and I was on LinkedIn and I was scrolling through all these jobs, GIS analyst, GIS specialist, GIS engineer. And I was like, right, okay, well, I'll apply to a few of these. And I do need to say this because if I don't say this and my partner is listening, he'll be cross because he technically found the job advert on LinkedIn. So if I don't give him a little credit, he'll probably be upset. So he was like, what about this one? And he sent me the link from LinkedIn, and the job title was Someone Awesome at GIS. And I was like, I'm awesome at GIS, perfect. But at that time, there was no digital footprint for oxygen conservation. There was no website. There wasn't even a LinkedIn page. There was the LinkedIn advert was being shown by Oxygen House. So I was like, I don't know who these people are. I think this sounds quite interesting. I love the job title. I'll apply. And then very shortly after, I got an email from someone saying, would I like to have an informal chat with you before any kind of formal interview happens. And we spoke, and just your kind of energy about the whole project, you told me everything that was your vision for it, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is great, I'm in.
Why on earth did you believe me?
You're very convincing.
Oh, I'll take that. Thank you. Just on the job title before we go past, I've had so much stick from people kind of older in their career about us having silly job titles or frivolous ones almost. But, how many GIS analyst jobs were there?
So many.
Yeah, so to stand out and be different, and I think we hear it from so many candidates now, like we were, and actually from people in the sort of wider world. So we were discussing an acquisition of a site in Scotland with a landowner who himself is towards the end of his career. I said, before we start, can I just say how awesome your job titles are? We're going to change some of ours because people want something that's exciting and meaningful. And how else did you jump off the page? That's what we were trying to do. So it's awesome that it works. So, okay, so we had a chat and I didn't manage to put you off. So that was good. And then next step?
Yeah, and then there was a more kind of formal interview, I guess. I was asked to do a bit of kind of take-home work. Also, basically, it's just given a PDF boundary of one of the sites, Wood Advent, and told to go away and do something cool with GIS with it, and then present that back at an interview panel with yourself and Dan and Dave. So I made a story map for that and sent it through. I kind of didn't really know what you were expecting. I didn't know, there was no indication of what you actually wanted. So that was just kind of my best effort, really.
Your interview was wonderful. So I can't remember the order of the day. You might have been second person, I think, out of four. Dave's nodding in the back of the room. And for our listeners who don't know this, I'm a really easygoing, laid-back interviewer. And the whole room's like, no, he's not. No, he's not. Arrogance at interview, and this isn't you by any stretch, doesn't come across well. So we had an initial candidate that went, I'm the best person in the world at GIS at everything. And it was like, sure, okay, cool. Show me. Where's the great stuff? And then the candidate was like, sorry, this was someone who followed you. And they went, well, I would have done a story map, but there just wasn't time. And I'm like, that's interesting. The candidate before you did a story map and it looked like this and this. And they were like, oh, right. Which I wouldn't have gone hard after the person if they hadn't have been so arrogant about, you're never going to find anyone better than me. I'm amazing. Whereas you did a ton of work and were so understated about the fact that you did it. It was an absolute joy. And we wanted you to wow us with what was possible with the data, and you did exactly that. Do you remember what else you showed us as well in terms of cool visuals?
Yeah, I had a whole PowerPoint, didn't I? I had some kind of little bits and pieces I'd done like a Valentine's Day map, beating heart, and each of the heart locations was a place name that had something like heart or love or something like that in the place name. Yeah, I remember. And
there was a Lord of the Rings thing.
Oh yeah, the Lord of the Rings map. Yeah, all of the filming locations with a cool Lord of the Rings style background. Yeah. I'll have to get that out again.
It was very cool. It was very cool. So we absolutely fell in love with you, and you were kind enough to come and be part of OC, and you are employee number
5.
Proudly, number 5.
Very proudly.
Awesome. And we sat here with like 20 plus people in the room and stuff now. How does that feel, having helped build that company, Lara?
Yeah, it's pretty shocking, really, when we were having our discussions about Q0.
Can you explain to people what Q0 is?
Q0, the idea behind it is that when you finish the year, you want to reflect on all of the interesting and amazing things that you've done, but you don't necessarily have the energy to, in that same meeting, go ahead and set goals for the next year. So we've got this cool idea of Q0 where you go away, you have your Christmas break, you get refreshed, you enjoy yourself, and then you come back, you're ready to start the year. We all get together and we do some cool stuff together. This year we did all sorts of interesting things, ice baths and sound baths and various other baths, I think, to come.
For avoidance of doubt, this is not me just making Lara do a variety of baths away.
And then we set all of our goals and objectives for the year in a space where we're relaxed and we're prepared to do that.
I always think it's a bit like, like me, I know you're massively into elite performance cycling, and this is our theme for Q0, and Dave. It's a bit like saying to the person as they cross the line at the Tour de France, so what do you want to do next year? And they're like, they just want to eat something and go home and fall asleep.
Exactly.
Yet in the corporate setting, we insist on saying to people, so what are you going to do next year? I just want to go home. I just want Christmas to get here. So that premise behind Q0. So you were taking us back to last Q0, were you?
So last Q0, there were 8 of us in a room in Oxygen House, being like, we're going to plant some trees and we're going to buy some land. And
we don't undersell my inspirational presentation too much.
It was great. But then when you asked us all this year, who was there last year, put up your hand, and it was less than half of the room, and I was like, wow, this is like, just thinking back to being in that room last year, it's like so different now.
It feels like 5 years ago, I think.
It does. It feels like such a long time ago.
Awesome. So you've arrived. What would you say are the key sort of chapters and milestones that you've done since you've led data and information for us?
I think a big part of it, well, I kind of split it into 2 main parts with an optional third part as well. I would say one thing is the site screening model. So our site acquisition process, it's all about making that process data-led and making that process, something where we can make informed decisions based on data. So, we've got some amazing sites in our portfolio, and we only want to have as good or better sites added to that. So designing a process which takes in a bunch of different, like a heap of different data, and synthesizes it and looks at it and can tell us information about that site before you even go there to visit. So that's been a really interesting process, creating a model which will do that.
How many environmental data sets now, do you think?
At least 50, but
Okay.
I haven't counted recently.
Okay.
So that's been super interesting, really interesting thing to work on. And then the second part is...
Just before we leave that, and the speed of that now is ludicrous as well, so you can do that so quickly. In fact, we'll come on to the... we're now actually segues into it. So you've pretty much scanned and evaluated the natural capital opportunities for 80% of Scotland.
Yep.
So now we're seeing opportunities come in, and actually it's a case of, well, we've scanned this, where does it sit on our ranking? So we're literally able to give sites, based on your work, a rank of how good an opportunity it is.
Yeah, because the first stage was kind of, the site comes onto market, create a model where you could kind of take the site boundary, press a button, it would do a load of geoprocessing, do some analysis, spit out some numbers, put it into a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet would then tell you what the potential of that site is.
Yeah.
So then we were kind of like, why are we waiting for these sites to come to market? Why don't we just analyze everything, and then we find the best sites, and then we can kind of pick and choose what we think is the most interesting, and we don't have to wait for the results. If a site does come to market, we know whether we think it's good or not.
What I love the process that you and Chris and James and others have built is that learning loop each time. So an additional site comes in, it improves our data set. Every time one of the market leaders releases something about land values or land types, we're bolstering that every time. And over the past, certainly the time you've been with us, each day, week, month, that model's got better and better and better, and that's super exciting.
Yeah, no, it's been a really interesting thing to work on. It's one of those things, like I was talking about earlier, where at times it can be really frustrating, and I'm like, why is this not working?
Can you tell the story about that weekend?
Oh, yeah, no, that was really bad. Well, I feel like I'd promised you'd asked me how long it would take to do this Scotland analysis, and I'd just really flippantly been like, a few days or something like that, or like the end of the week. Yeah, the end of the week is what I said. So then...
Because I didn't set the deadline, you set the deadline,
I mean,
right?
I suppose I did set the deadline, but I feel like I'd like locked into that. I'd said that I could get it done by the end of the week. And then it just... a few other things had come up in the week, so I had kind of a little bit less time to work on it than I thought. And then I was just trying to run this section of it, and it just wasn't working, and I just couldn't work out why. I'd got frustrated with it on the Friday, so I'd left it and been like, I'll come back to it on the Sunday. There'll be just a couple of things to do, and then I'll send it to Rich then. So then that's the end of the week. And I was there on Sunday, and it just still wasn't working. And I was like, I'm going to have to admit to Rich that I couldn't get it done.
This email came through, and it was very professional, because you always have, but I was like, shit, Lara's pissed off with GIS, like they've fallen out, she's not happy.
We were having a scrap.
Yeah.
And I just, sent you this email, and I was like, look, Rich, it's not working, give me a few more days, I'll come back to you next week when it's done. And then I had one of those moments where...
Wait. And I did reply with, that's awesome, you're amazing, thank you.
Fine. Yeah, no, you were absolutely fine about it, which I knew you would be, but I felt bad because I don't like to make a promise that
I talked to Dave about this, your partner at the Christmas party, and he was like, she was so pissed off. Like, he's like, no, I know you weren't pushing for it, it's like, I just wanted to nail it. But
then, I said, give me a few more days, and then I woke up on Monday morning and I was just like, I know how to get this to work, and I did it on Monday.
So there's an awesome learning point for people out there. Sometimes you can keep fighting it, or you can just step away, give yourself a minute, do the thing that rejuvenates and restores you, and look at it in a different way, or seek a different piece of advice, or if it does feel too challenging to do it in that way, find someone who'll give you a different suggestion about doing it. Yeah, definitely. I've had so many moments where I've just had to leave something, and then I'll be like lying in bed at night, and I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, I know how to do it. It just comes to me in the night, Sometimes leaving it is the best option. Nice. So there was two bits you were going to mention in the role. So one bit is the land evaluation, data modelling, proprietary side of it. Next chapter. And then the other side is, the sites that we already have, and
each site we have is super different, super unique, and we don't want to treat them all the same. So we spend a long time doing some really interesting survey work, environmental baselining, so that we can understand what
Can you share some examples of what that might look like?
Yeah, for some of the sites, well, for all of the sites, there are certain things that we do for all of them. So a habitat survey, a breeding bird survey, a soil sampling survey, rivers, we look at the river quality. Those are some things that we do at every site.
Topo survey.
Oh yeah,
Tom.
drone survey. Sorry, Tom. But then some of the sites are really unique and have some really interesting things, and we do additional surveys there. Like at Leon, we did a fungi survey, which was just like absolutely magical thing to read. It's a list of all these amazing mushroom names. Esgaroth, we did a kind of ancient and veteran tree survey. So, these surveys do depend on what there is at the site.
Yeah.
So we want to understand what each site has before we do any changes. Before we plant a tree, before we change a river, we want to know what's best for the site. So.
And that takes time as well, time and patience. And sometimes people say to us, oh, well, you haven't changed much. I know, because we're listening and learning and trying to take our time to make an informed perspective.
Yeah, so the challenge to that, from my perspective, was to create a data model for all of that data to go into. So what I wanted was a model whereby you could cut the data in different ways depending on what information you were trying to get. So, we could have had a data set which was like, this is the river data from Esgaroth and this is the habitat data from Leon, but you don't really want that because then you can't understand portfolio level statistics. So if you wanted to say, how much woodland do we have at every site, you need a data model that allows you to cut the data in that way. So designing a model that allows you to collect all of that data was quite challenging, and it's something that I'm definitely still working on.
I don't think people think about that in terms of, like, if you had to paper store copies of everything we need a warehouse. I don't think, and integrating it in the right way and working to it. So the data sort of structuring and archiving of that is something I think people take for granted, whereas actually it's such an important part allowing us to report and manage on things.
Yeah, definitely. And the other part of that is that something which I'd never had to do before is like, a lot of people don't like to think about nature as data. They don't want to think about it as ones and zeros. They're like,
It's like a moral aversion to that almost.
Yeah, they're like, I want to walk into this beautiful meadow and look at these amazing trees. But I really get a kick out of, how do we break this down? How do we break down the amazing rainforest at Leon? How do we break down the beautiful...
How many different habitat types do we have in model at the moment?
In our sites?
Yeah.
Wow, there must be 50
different types. And how many different parts of the country, when we're looking at land, do we split it into, in terms of like different regions or areas?
Broad regions of the country, something like 10 or 12.
Okay, and within the regions, do we split down even further?
Well, you can split down into like local authorities and things like that.
So in terms of when we're valuing things or evaluating it, so we've got habitat type by geography, which gives us such an array of different combinations. So when people say, how much is an acre of? Well, specifically what and specifically where makes such a difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so data archiving as well of it, and you said there was a +1?
Yeah, I guess the other side to what I do is just kind of what I like to think of as cool maps and visualizations.
Yeah, we've had to play with a few of those, right?
Yeah, so that can be, anything from, I made an animation showing all of the travel that, everyone records all of their mileage and all of the journeys that they do. So an animation starting at the start of OC of all of the journeys that everyone's taken.
Are we going to put that on the website? Yes, Elle's in the room, and I think we're going to put it on the website so we want to be as transparent about everything in terms of the information, but this will show every journey that we've ever done.
So yeah, things like that. I've done, some of our board members are really into running, so I've done running maps showing elevation of some of our hillier sites.
Yeah. Do you remember the topographic one for one of the board's Christmas presents where we'd done the sort of shape patterns of the contour lines?
Yeah, that one of Pound Tour, that was really nice.
Cool.
Yeah. So just doing interesting things and making cool maps and sharing those with the team.
It's when I love it when we tell people that people ask about the company. I'm like, we're a data company at heart, because I'm as likely to send a message to you about a cool visualization that's, oh, can we look at that? Can we? You're like, yes, let's do that. And love geeking out on that stuff. Is there a piece you're most proud of? One bit that you think that I love or adore and I'm super proud of it?
I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of it already. You know, the site screening, that model, I feel like that's my baby. You know, I've worked so hard on that, and you know, I get to use it every week, and I just sit there and I press a button and it goes and it does all its calculations, and that's just so satisfying to me. So definitely
It's
that.
one of the massive points of differentiation for us as a company. It's allowed us to do something special. We've got a room full of people. Can we get a round of applause for Lara, please? They're still going, they're trying to keep going. We're going to use that moment to take a brief pause and we'll come back for part two.
Cool.
Hi Lara, part two.
Hi.
So you and I wrote a piece a little while ago about the challenges of environmental data in this country. Can you give our listeners, from your perspective, what are the frustrations, the challenges when you think about the environment from a data perspective?
So I think, you know, there's a lot of data out there. Like, I love how big open data has become and how many kind of bodies have been pushed to publish their data and make it available for people to use. Like, I really like that. I really appreciate that. But the challenge is that just because data is out there and just because there's a lot of data out there doesn't mean it's good data.
Yeah.
So often data will get published but then forgotten, and kind of like, oh, they found this amazing data source, but it's from 20 years ago. And you're like, well, that's, from an environmental perspective, that's not super helpful. Also, there's a frustrating kind of administrative boundary element to it. So, you know, the environment doesn't stop between England and Scotland. There's not some border where habitats just stop existing. But for some reason, that's how the data is formatted. They don't want to talk to each other. They don't want to. They might both have a habitat data set. You might have a habitat data set for England and one for Scotland, but the classifications and the habitats that they use are different, and it's not possible to marry those up. And you know, like I was talking about with the work that we do, I want to be able to talk about things from a portfolio level. It would be nice to talk about things from at least an entire nation, you know, the whole of the UK, if not really the world. You know, so some of those things are quite frustrating because you have to deal with 3 different data sets for every single data set you're wanting to look at. So of those 50 data sets, a lot of them are kind of repeat data sets because they're slightly different or they're in a different format, or for England, Scotland and Wales. So it becomes challenging to deal with and challenging to maintain and look at when there's lots of different things flying around.
I remember earlier in my career, I used to be, as is so often the way with young opinionated men, that either data was good or it was just worthless, don't use it at all. But actually, as I've got older and learned more, I think the presence of any data gives us a starting point, and then we can start improving on it and iterating it. It's a hell of a jump from having nothing to an amazing data set. If you've got some data, work with what you've got in the context of understanding it, but try and improve it and work forward. What are some of the changes that you would like to see happen with spatial data in this country?
Some of the changes I would like to see, I think there's a lot that's already happening that's only going to get better and better around remote collection of data. Some of the data sets that we deal with are, you know, someone's had to go out in person and look at something, and that makes it hard to repeat. You know, if you have to send someone out, you have to find someone who's got the time and willing to go, and that takes effort and it takes planning, and maybe they have to go at a certain time of year, and it just kind of doesn't work out. But the more we can do with drones and low Earth orbit satellites and remote sensors placed and left in the field and collecting data and sharing them out, the more that we can collect, you know, the more information we can get. So I'd love to see more with that, and like what goes along with that, because obviously in that situation you're collecting a lot of data, and that becomes more and more difficult to process and manage. And I feel like the rise of machine learning and AI, it would be so cool to marry those things together, and that is starting to happen already.
And we're so close to that with the evaluation model we talked about, that it is a self-learning process in a way, we can do more and more to automate that. But we're already seeing that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so if we could take the huge amounts of data being collected remotely and have it almost be learning itself and learning what it's looking for, and you might be looking for deforestation in the Amazon, or you might just be
Deer in Scotland.
Deer in Scotland, or things like that. So I think there's massive potential there, these things are already happening.
And we interviewed a machine learning specialist as part of the recent intern campaign, right? Which the potential there of that application now, that person isn't coming to us. We found another amazing person to work with you instead, but that's got to be the next chapter.
Definitely.
Amazing. So what advice would you give someone sat doing geography or not even there yet who likes data, and those people that look at a map and smile and think that's super cool? What advice would you give them about thinking about their career?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we've just recently been recruiting for a geospatial intern. So I've had the chance to look at, I think, 85 different CVs, and
Andrew's over your shoulder, who led the recruitment. He's just smiling and nodding about 455 people for. But in fact, one of our new interns in the room at the moment. Can we get a round of applause for her, please? The 1%, right? So, sorry, 85 CVs.
So going through that process, it makes you you have to be kind of cruel in a way. I started by reading them.
Selective,
okay. I started by reading them, and I'd be like, oh, this person sounds good, they've done some interesting stuff. But once you've read 85, you really need something to stand out. And I think there's massive opportunities at the moment with things online and things you can do. There's so many free online courses and things you can get involved with. So obviously it's cool when someone's done something interesting, they've done some cool travel, but I don't want people to think that they have to be in that privileged position of being able to go traveling and do something interesting to have their CV stand out. I was really excited whenever I saw a CV that had, I've done these 5 online courses and I've completed them, because it just showed that they were genuinely interested in the topic. They'd gone out of their way. They hadn't just done their degree and been like, all right, goodbye and go home. They'd gone out of their way in their spare time and learn extra stuff. And I think that really makes you stand out.
A couple of people within the team will screen CVs to come through as a yes, no, they're complete, they're incomplete, etc. And often we'll choose former interns or early career professionals to do that, because otherwise, in my career, the first time I got to look at CVs from a hiring perspective was when I was a line manager. How did I know what good or indifferent looked like? I'd mainly seen mine or my friends. So if you can ask people at the start of their career to screen what that looks like, great, you've got a whole spectrum of looking at. There's some people smiling behind me who've looked at hundreds and hundreds this year and now know what a good CV looks like. Then it moves forward to sort of like the line manager and a few others that looked at CVs with you. But I think that's so important because different people have different perspectives on what they're looking at. So like you, I look at the extracurricular, but I do really focus in on the bottom half of the CV of and it doesn't have to be international travel, but I like to see where someone has set themselves an ambitious goal and achieved it, whatever that element of hard work or suffering looks like, whether it's a Duke at Edinburgh Award, whether it's volunteering, whether it's I worked X nights in a pub while I put myself through uni or what. If you've decided you want something and have worked really hard to get there, my view is, well, if you want to be here, then you have the ability to be successful. So back to your 85, it was the additional courses that stood out? So that's where you'd focus your advice?
Yeah, I think just something to show that you've gone above and beyond the degree that you're doing. Something that shows that you've taken an interest in GIS or whatever it is that you're specifically interested in. You've gone out of your way to learn something around what is just being fed to you. I think that's what really stood out to me.
Nice.
And then when it gets to the interview stage, the candidates that really impressed, everyone talks about the kind of the work or projects that they've done during their degree or something similar. But if you can apply what you've learned to the company that you're applying for, if you take your GIS knowledge that you've learned at university and say, this is how you could use GIS and this is how I think GIS would be helpful to you, that was what took them to the next level for me. They'd gone beyond what they'd been taught and what they'd had in lectures and what they'd read about, and they'd actually applied that information to what we do.
Yeah, there's no we don't have an absence of a digital footprint now, right? People can
Exactly.
find out as much
Yeah.
as they want about OC, and we've literally put out pieces on what you think about data and how we want to look at that, and about how to be successful at interview, and tons of podcasts about the team and things. So really, the people that were turning up unprepared, you just need to do the work, right? That being said, there was one candidate who was really wonderful, and they turned up and they'd over-prepped. So if you've been interviewed by the team, especially Dan, who's sat behind me, don't quote me at Dan. He doesn't like it. And if you quote me 4 times at Dan, he's like, I've got enough of this. I don't need an echo. So yeah, prepared, not overly much.
But have your own ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, apply it in your own
Yeah.
way. Totally. So, one of my favourite things about working with you, you do annual leave better than anyone I've ever met. So we like to have a culture around environment, impact and adventure, and you're all about the adventure, right?
Definitely.
Can you tell people some of the adventures you've been on since you've been part of OC?
Yeah, I actually just got back from a week in the Cairngorms in Scotland.
Casual.
So we had this amazing winter conditions, did a winter skills course where we learnt to use crampons and ice axes, and we climbed up this ridgeline to the top of Cairngorm in wind chill of -15, and they taught us how to, if you end up sliding down the hill headfirst on your back, how to use the ice axe to stop you, all sorts of stuff like that. So that was really cool. Other things, week of surf camp in Portugal.
Which you worked through, right? Didn't you
Oh,
offset?
that was in Cornwall. Yeah, that was good. That was worked in the morning, surfed in the afternoons, had half days for a week.
Nice.
That was really fun.
I love you. Challenged me so much on this and campervan in France.
Campervan in France,
Yeah.
bouldering in France,
Nice.
all sorts.
You challenge me, so I talk about wanting these adventures and stuff, and you're like, okay, so can I do this and this? I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. And what's the next big adventure, Lara?
I think the next big adventure is that I'm actually moving. So I'm moving out of London. I've lived in and around London for about 6 years, and I've loved it. I've loved the culture, and I've loved my time there. It's been really fun, but I'm ready to have a bit more nature and a bit more of the environment on my doorstep. So I'm moving to Kendal, just outside the Lake District, and I'm so excited to, on my lunch breaks, be able to run up a fell, or go paddleboarding in Windermere, or go bouldering in Kentmere, and just have that all there, like, ready to go whenever possible.
I mean, that wasn't the one I was thinking about.
That's not the one you're thinking about.
No. Japan?
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, yeah. The plan is, and thank you very much for allowing this to happen, I've never been to Asia, and I've always wanted to go, and one of my friends is living out in Japan at the minute, and I've always wanted to go, but I've always been a little bit funny about the carbon footprint of taking a flight for a short holiday. I'm like, I'm gonna go, let's do this properly, let's do it a bit more slowly, and let's stay for longer. So we're gonna go out and do 2 weeks in Vietnam, and then 2 weeks in Japan, a week working, 2 weeks holiday, and then another week working, so that we can have longer out there for the kind of flight and the time that we're taking. So
I love that you're doing that. It's amazing and inspirational, and I love that it pushes the boundaries of, well, I sit here talking about wanting people to take adventures, and I remember when that was first broached to me, I was like, every part of my traditional business brain was like, of course that's not possible, but I was like, yeah, we've got to find a way, because if I want it to be about adventure, the person who is the adventurer, we've got to support in terms of doing that. So my steer to anyone who owns a business out there or is running one, find a way to say yes, because you get amazing people that are willing to work with you if you do. So I'm super inspired by the way you do that, Lara, and it allows me to push everyone else in the team to say, are you taking the adventures you should be? Because if not, Lara will take your leave and she'll go do it. Okay, so that segues into, you are incredibly good at working remotely. And this is going to be pushing that boundary to working remotely internationally. What tips would you give for people who have a very sort of focused data role that they can get quite insular on to making remote working work for them?
I think you have to really take advantage of the flexibility I feel like that's the major difference between an office-based role and a home-based role, and it's very easy to just wake up. Like right now, my desk is in my bedroom, so as soon as I open my eyes, I see my laptop. It's very easy to just slide out of bed, straight into the chair, just start working, just let the day get away with you. But if you have this ability to be flexible, then why not take advantage of that? So, you know, winter is particularly difficult. It's difficult for a lot of people with daylight, and the only daylight being during working hours. So if you wake up and it's an amazing day, like maybe I'll just get outside for a walk or run, do something like that, and then work into the evening when it's dark and miserable and I don't have anything fun to do. So similarly with, you know, I might finish work early-ish on a Friday if I know that the weekend, the forecast is bad, and then I'll have a rainy Sunday afternoon finishing up some work that needs to get done.
It's why one of the recommended reading lists for OC is bunch of hours, let your people go surfing. You can't make the waves behave to your timetable, but you can adjust your time to the waves. So do the same with the weather and the opportunities you can to go do that. So we've talked about international expansion and my dreams of the US and Australia out. What does that look like for taking your skill set and data approach and applying that internationally? How soon are we ready to go?
Well, as soon as you want us to be, really, Rich.
Love that.
But it is...
Shout out to Esme for doing a lot of the groundwork on that.
It is challenging because, firstly, the data set that you want might just not exist, or the concept that you're thinking of might not exist. Like, we have a lot of different environmental designations in this country, SSSIs, nature reserves, all sorts of things that concept might not exist in the States, for example. So you can't just do a one-to-one. I need to look for this data set. Secondly, that data set might not be as relevant. You know, I feel like we as a team have a good understanding now of this country and what's possible where, and you know, where's it possible to put a wind farm, where's it possible to plant some trees, and where's it appropriate to plant some trees.
Yeah, we're not so good on cacti yet, are we?
Exactly. So it's not even just finding the same data sets, it's finding out what data sets we need to find. So that just creates all sorts of new challenges in research that we need to do, but all very exciting at the same time.
Nice. Lara, it's been an absolute pleasure having you as part of OC, and thank you so much for coming and diving into the shoot room. That's us done.
Thank you.
Thank you.